Hello once again, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on this special edition of Bang the Book Radio for Friday, August 16th. Going to chat UFC 241 with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. Should be a lot of fun to break this one down, including that main event fight that we've all been waiting for, Daniel Cormier, the champ, versus Stipe Miocic here. An interesting adjustment to that line, as Christian and I will talk about here in a couple of minutes. Bang the Book Radio, our daily shows get back on track on Monday. We'll go at least an hour every day, couple of guests per show for the most part. Monday, I'll do the Bettors Box to start things off. Then we'll chat some college football with Kyle Hunter. And then Tuesday, Brian Blessing and Rolf Michaels. Wednesday, we'll chat with Brian Leonard. Thursday, Brad Powers. Friday, we'll have Christian on again and also chat with Brent, the oddsmaker from DSI Sportsbook. So next week, we'll kind of ease back into things a little bit. We'll keep doing the UFC segments, at least for now. Once we get to the football season and we're doing our super contest segment, we'll figure it out on Fridays. But very busy, very good times going on here at bangthebook.com on Bang the Book Radio as we get ready for the college football and the NFL seasons. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Christian Pina joins me from the Sports Gambling Podcast here to chat about UFC 241 in Anaheim, California. Christian, how's it going today, man?
Good, man. What a lineup that you have, and happy to be a part of it, man. And you said it. It is finally here. One of the best UFC cards loaded, specifically on that main card, top to bottom. We have Cormier, Miocic too. I mean, so long in the making for what's going on with DC in his career. Everything from kind of looking for that big money fight with Brock Lesnar. Lesnar retires from the sport. Cormier doesn't really know what to do, and here we are as kind of the biggest fight possible for him at this stage, unless John Jones wants to eventually make that leap to heavyweight. So, top to bottom, one of the most stacked cards of the year, and so happy to break it down from a betting perspective with you, man.
So as we look at this fight here, Christian, UFC 226, July 7th, 2018, a lot of us looking forward to this fight. Cormier moves up to heavyweight, winds up becoming a champ. And Stipe was a pretty decent-sized favorite in that fight, and he got knocked around, first-round knockout for Cormier. What was that line more than a year ago, and what do you think about the adjusted number now with Cormier generally out there in the minus 140 range?
Yeah, man. I mean, it really depends on what book that you want to go on. But just to give a little bit of perspective, when they fought the first time, Will Hill out here in town, minus 227 for Stipe, come back on Cormier, plus 175 as you look towards kind of the offshore worlds. I mean, they're mostly in the minus 170 range for Stipe and about the plus 140 comeback. If you look at the average, it's about minus 155 Stipe and Cormier plus 143 across both Vegas and the offshore worlds, man. So, I mean, you're looking at, over $1 flip when it, because of how the market has a tendency, especially inside the octagon, to kind of, correct and overcorrect a little bit when we talk about the price range. But I understand it. I mean, you look at this first fight, and if you go back and look at it, this was, Miocic lost this fight getting clipped, right? It got absolutely floored. But up until that point, Stipe was winning that fight, stuffing takedowns. And he really just kind of underestimated, Cormier's power, which even I have a tendency to do. You know that I love these guys that will go out there and do what they need to do no matter how boring it is. And, Daniel Cormier by decision certainly fits that mold. So it'll be interesting, man. And when you look at Stipe, he almost, I know you're a Cleveland guy, so don't hate me for saying this, but I feel like, a little bit disrespected when it comes to that, but then you really break down who he, went up against and who he beat. When you run it back, right, lost to Cormier, understandable for sure. Francis Ngannou was, that fight was something that put him into put Ngannou into a little bit of a mental pretzel and really started, that was the reason for the Lewis, debacle and all that. But he put on a clinic against a guy who just couldn't wrestle and never been exploited before. And, so props to him on a great game plan and avoiding that knockout power. Almost died along the way. But then you look at wins, and granted they are KOs. But you look at Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Verdum, Arlovsky, Mark Hunt, who I'm not very high on either of those. Before losing to Junior Dos Santos. So it's not, first of all, you can only beat who's in front of you, and he's done what he needed to do in Stipe. But, this speaks to the lack of depth in the heavyweight division, and I'm not going to fault him for that, but it's not exactly, you can look back and say it's a murderer's row, especially with Ngannou, but that was a different version of Ngannou. Alistair Overeem, past his prime. Verdum, Arlovsky, as you know, I feel is the ghost of him, and Mark Hunt just couldn't really take him down and wrestle because not a lot of guys are on that level with Stipe. But you're talking about the quintessential striker versus grappler matchup here, despite the last fight ending in a knockout for the grappler.
So, I mean, as we look at this thing, I think it's perfectly fair to say, and I'll defend Stipe here to the death, because, I mean, this is a Cleveland or die kind of guy, and you got to love that for, somebody who's local like I am. And in fact, I grew up, very close to where the Strong Style Training Center actually is. It was a shock to the system because the heavyweight division has not been very good for a long time. And that's exactly what you just alluded to there. Going to a guy like Cormier, who has heavyweight power, but light heavyweight quickness and a much more impressive resume, I think that was a tough thing for Stipe to sort of walk into that situation, maybe not fully expecting what he was going to get. The question is, can things be different for him the second time around?
Yeah, I mean, you look at, Cormier and you look at, how he has won, right? It's Derek Lewis submission that really was a televised sparring match and went as expected. Laid on him and just finished along the way. Stipe, the KO. Okay. Ozdemir, the KO, not a quintessential KO. Let's gloss over the Jones fight. It's a no contest in the books, but we all know what happened there. Then you look at the run before that, right? Anthony Johnson submission, Anderson Silva decision, Alexander Gustafsson decision, Anthony Johnson submission, and on down through the line. The point that I'm trying to make here is, DC is who we know him to be. He is going to use his Olympic wrestling. He is going to try to stay in top position for 5 rounds and win a decision. And if he finishes via ground and pound in transition or submission along the way, great. The word fluke, I don't think is necessarily fair to talk about what happened in the last fight. When you can get DC at plus money for a guy who's really only ever lost to somebody with the last name Jones and the first name John, it certainly is always going to make some sense. This line right now, as it stands, is what I made the first line for their fight to be. That's the truth. And got lucky. And like I said, in my estimation, Stipe was really winning that fight up until that point, of the knockout. I really do believe Stipe took his striking and power or lack thereof kind of for granted, and he got caught, and that will certainly happen inside the UFC. So, mentally, the loss, I think, is going to be a lot better for Stipe. The problem I have, in betting this fight at the price is, Cormier has gone through the who's who. The resume is absolutely incredible. I know how the resume, some people feel it looks for Stipe, and, I'm largely in that camp. Again, what he did to Ngannou and just surviving and out wrestling a guy who had no wrestling shouldn't be taken away from him. He beat Ngannou, and there's nothing that, can't be taken away from him. I think that mentally he now knows that is an option for Cormier, and he can game plan for it. And, in theory, this fight sets up a lot better knowing that at least that is in his back pocket and he can actually prepare for it this time.
So we are recording this here on Thursday, early evening in the Eastern time zone, fairly early afternoon out there out west where you are. Have you seen a round prop for this? Do you have an idea of where it may come out and what you think you'll decide to do with that, if anything?
I haven't yet, man. And DC fights usually right around 3.5. I was trying to find what the original one, the original round prop was, but I just couldn't find it right now. Fight goes to decision for the first one was, no, man, I really can't find it. Just a bunch of the props right now that are from last time out there. I mean, when you look at that, what happened, Cormier wins by TKO or KO is plus 530. To put that into perspective, Miocic wins by decision plus 220. Cormier decision was plus 430. Miocic round 1 plus 535. Cormier round 1 was 16-1, man. So, as I look through these odds, it was probably, as they get worse, throughout going 3 to 5. I would say they'll probably hang a 3.5 is pretty standard for Cormier fights, as he is usually in championship or main event fights for that 5-round duration. So I would say it's probably right around a 3.5. I'm not going to get involved. Both of these guys, Stipe can put the lights out on Cormier. That's the fact. And, nobody has really been better in that transition game of pulling off stoppages and really winning the fight pillar to post if it went to a decision or if it didn't and got finished along the way. So I'm not going to probably be getting involved in this fight either way from a betting perspective as the current prices. But, from a pick perspective, man, you're never going to get me to bet against Daniel Cormier unless he is fighting one John Jones. And that's the stance that I'll take on this one as well.
All right, so we definitely have a lot to look forward to here in the main event, and I'll, of course, be pulling for Stipe. Maybe I'll put, maybe I'll put the emotional hedge on Cormier here in this one, but we've got some very good fights on the card otherwise. Anthony Pettis and Nate Diaz. You got Pettis right now, minus 130 favorite over at DSI. What are you thinking about this fight here, Christian?
Yeah, Nate Diaz making his return, polarizing guy and polarizing figure in the sport. Hasn't fought since, the McGregor series back in 2016, March 5th and August 20th. And, if you kind of take those out of there, the last win comes in, not that I want to take away his McGregor win, but, it is what it is. The last wins have come in 2016 and 2015. Nate Diaz, because of who he is and the persona that, he brings to the table, largely gets a pass when it comes to the technical version of it being a mixed martial artist. He's a boxer, man. And I'm not trying to, take away from what he is, but, losses against Rafael Dos Anjos, Josh Thompson, Benson Hernandez, Rory McDonald, DK Kim, not exactly the, murderer's row of a resume. And Diaz largely gets a pass because people just absolutely love him. On the other side, I feel like Anthony Pettis just kind of, I don't want to say won't go away, but he keeps fighting despite, having to do kind of the same analysis on him. He is a, shot fighter at this point. He's not close to what he was. Despite that, there are very winnable fights for him in the UFC just because of the experience and what he can bring to the table. Look, they are both as slick as it comes on the ground. I wouldn't expect a submission match, only if one of them gets dropped and it's just ended that way via, TKO ground and pound submission or something along the way like that. This is going to be a bloody battle on the feet, and this is going to be an absolute war. Diaz has been out for so long, but, he's always prided himself and has always had some of the best conditioning in the sport. When you're talking about a stand-up boxing match, there's not a lot of guys, from that perspective, that you should probably take over a guy like Diaz. But, truthfully, Pettis does have more of the speed, more variety. He's definitely the much better technical, well-rounded mixed martial artist. The strength of Diaz is just going to come from as long as he can keep this a grimy, bloody boxing match and kind of make this a street fight. If, Pettis is able to get those kicks going and kind of employ those, technical strikes more than just the street fight version of Nate Diaz, this is a winnable fight for him. But again, not when you look at the reach advantage, that's the one thing that should really stand out to you here. I mean, Diaz has a huge one, 76 inches against 72 and a half. So Pettis is going to have to kind of pull out all the stops, stick and move a little bit, get in close and kind of, make this as technical as he can, while Diaz will look for kind of the street fight brawl aspect. Again, not to hate to sound like I'm on the fence about both these two fights, but I would certainly side with Diaz. It's just, I think that the market just really kind of overcorrects for the name value and it's going to keep me off. So the proverbial dog or pass situation here, but I'm just going to be on the pass side of it.
Well, and it's so tough, too. I mean, as you mentioned, Diaz, it's basically almost a 3-year hiatus. And then for Anthony Pettis, just 4-6 in his last 10 fights. And yeah, he's fought some very, very strong fighters. Great resume for both of these guys, truthfully, in terms of caliber of opponents. But, for Pettis here, he's less than a 50-50 proposition over his last 10 fights against dudes that all have talent. What does he do here? It's a dude that has talent despite the 3-year layoff. I think it is a challenging fight to try and handicap, and I certainly don't blame you for being on the fence there with that one. We'll see if you've got some stronger opinions here about this one. In the middleweight division, Yoel Romero, a minus 150 favorite against Paulo Costa. What do you think about this fight?
Yeah, man, this is going to be another absolute war. You look at the age difference will be the first thing that should kind of stick out at you here. Costa, look, 12-0 Brazilian on, hyped prospect, 28 years old against the 42-year-old Yoel Romero. Romero hasn't fought in over a year since the second L to Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker. In the title shots, missing weight, had some things come up, and he is really on the back end of the career and at age 42, desperate for another title chance and gold title aspirations here. And this is this is going to be a really tough task for him, man. This, Costa is one of the only fighters in this division that can match the kind of physical intimidation prowess. You look at these two guys up close, the weigh-in is going to be a spectacle if you're into kind of, how people can manipulate the human body to look a certain way. It's really going to be crazy to see these two guys in the shape that they're in. That is for sure. Costa's, won every fight in the UFC, 4-0, and, eviscerating people by knockouts. Specifically Uriah Hall of the last time. And this one, it's going to be fireworks, man. It's going to be dynamite. It's going to be these, the Pettis fight and this one specifically are going to be what, draws in the casual fans if you're into that type of fight. Romero needs to be a little bit patient here, but Costa's instincts are, his game is where Romero's was a long time ago, and Costa may just do everything a little bit stronger, faster, quicker. So I think they're going to go in the middle and kind of bang it out until somebody falls. I don't see this one lasting that long. That's for sure. If there was a 2.5 out there when the Brown props get hung, that's definitely where I would look. But for me, this is Costa via knockout, TKO, and Romero suffers, yet another kind of devastating loss in his hopes to get back.
Well, and the thing about Romero, too, you've kind of mentioned this before, and I know this is an angle that you've talked about, and I do want to make sure that we touch on this. Romero took a beating in that last Robert Whittaker fight, had some facial injuries. These two were supposed to fight originally late last year at UFC 230, but doctors advised Romero that he not take the fight so that he could keep healing. Then he still wound up, having another fight canceled after that. So do you worry about Romero and his ability to take punishment here?
Yeah, man, look, he also, the first thing here is Romero's missed weight in his last 2 fights, once against Whittaker, Rockhold. So it's a little bit, that's the first thing that you're going to have to look at, right? And again, it's the trend of kind of, fading guys off of that, title aspirations. Originally for the interim belt with Rockhold, misses weight. Now he can't do it. Gets Whittaker, takes that L. This is one of my favorite situations in UFC to bet against is, think about it. A guy trains his whole life, gets the one opportunity. And how can it not be a mental letdown the next fight to kind of start over and start that climb again? So it's one of my favorite kind of angles inside the UFC and one that I will certainly be on when it comes to Costa and just, the long play of playing that angle right now.
Well, especially when you look at a guy like Romero who got that title shot over the age of 40, so it was late in his career. Chances of getting back to that certainly pretty minute at this point in time, but of course he'll have to win this fight to have any hopes of doing that. Looking at the rest of the main card here, Benitez and Youssef, Brunson and Heinisch, anything on either one of these 2 fights that you want to talk about?
Yeah, man, let's talk about this Gabriel Benitez and Youssef fight. Youssef is a guy I am very, very high on. We haven't seen Benitez for 15 months. So this is going to be an absolutely great matchup. Youssef earned a shot in the UFC after he beat, I believe, Mike Davis on Dana White's Contender Series. And Youssef is just so dangerous on the feet, man. So his technique is so crisp. He is so technical. The speed power blend for a featherweight is absolutely crazy here. Benitez is going to try and get this one to the mat using the grappling, the explosiveness, I just see this fight kind of a longer version of, dare I say, the Askren Masvidal fight. There's going to be a rogue knee. There's going to be a highlight kind of, wheelhouse round kick eventually from a guy like Youssef. So I definitely do favor him there. And that's another play I'm probably looking to make on this 241 card.
Anything on Brunson and Heinisch?
When you look at man, I went back and forth on this fight a little bit. I really did. I don't see a ton of value on either side as it stands right now. Ian Heinisch is a guy to me, when you look at, kind of his body of work, coming into this, 5-0 in his last 5 for sure. And Brunson on the other side, has a huge reach advantage, which may probably keep me off of this fight. And both of them, despite the kind of knockout potential that I think people are looking for here, they're both great wrestlers, and specifically Brunson. There should be some great exchanges on the feet for sure. Overhand right, of course, from Heinisch, always in play. Brunson, just the way that he's able to add an element of kind of power and explosiveness to those takedowns, really on one hand, it works out great for him some of the times, but he leaves himself so open and vulnerable, for these type of counter punching knockout style type of fighters, which is where Heinisch can really flourish in this. So I would lean by with Heinisch via knockout, in kind of transition, and maybe a fluke elbow, knee, something lands along the way here. But I would certainly lean with Heinisch. It's just there's a little bit the variables here, because if Brunson is able to kind of spend enough time in top position, it wouldn't shock me. So that's going to probably keep me off that for the main fight or main card.
Well, of course, these 5 fights here, all on pay-per-view, part of the prelim card on ESPN, the other part on UFC Fight Pass, UFC's all-digital network. But let's go to the prelim portion on ESPN here. Last week, we talked about Cyril Gane. And we talked about Cyril Gane, sort of the protege of Francis Ngannou, talked about him being a good bet for the under and also to win that fight as a pretty big favorite. Seems like we've got a fairly similar situation here this week at an even bigger money line number on Devontae Smith.
Yeah, man, when that prop opened, I told you that was probably going to be the only play for me last week on that UFC card was the under 1.5 in Cyril Gane's fight. And, it opened under 1.5 minus 180, and I laid it. And, thankfully things worked out. Didn't really work out exactly how I thought via submission. I thought it would definitely be via knockout, but we have a, definite situation here of the same that's going to come out. Look, you look at this, Devontae Smith, 6 of his 9 knockout wins come in the first round. Worthy is, also just gave way to, initially had a 6-fight win streak, gave way to 2 and 4 skid, bounced back for 3 straight. He has really been the definition of up and down. And, he's only been to judge's scorecard 4 times, 6 other victories knockout. This is the same exact situation here. We look at this. I mean, Smith is such a big favorite here. Look, I get it. I mean, even worse than Gane. And that's, for that Gane fight, I would have made that line about minus 700 myself. And so I totally get the correction here. These guys are going to walk to the middle. They are going to bang it out until somebody falls. And I do not see this lasting past the first round. That is for sure. I mean, you look at Worthy, 3 of his 5 knockout losses have come in a combined 3 minutes and 19 seconds. That is combined. He has 0 striking defense, and he is just going to go out there and wail. And, to me, Devontae Smith ends this in the first round, but there is an opportunity, instead of trying to navigate this minus 700 plus price, to me, the under 1.5, whatever the juice is, that's the play I'll be on this week.
One other fight I know you wanted to highlight, then we'll bounce around and see if there's anything else on the prelims. Manny Bermudez. We've talked about him before, taking on Casey Kenny here. Bermudez, a minus 130 favorite. Is the wrong fighter favored here?
Man, I sit here and I try to tell people and try to convince you to bet against Manny Bermudez every single time. And at the end of the day, I look up and he's 14-0 with 9 first-round finishes on his way before getting to the UFC, and 6 of them in less than 2 minutes. Look, Bermudez triangle. He is much like Mickey Gall, has a WWE finisher. He's a one-trick pony. If he cannot get that triangle, he is largely going to be overmatched and he's going to lose the fight. That's why I've always kind of tried to look for situations at big dog money to fade him here. Bermudez submitted 11 professional opponents, knocking out 1 more. Casey Kenny, let's talk about him. I mean, you look at the Contender Series, 1-1. Went back into LFA, took the interim bantamweight title there, and then beat Ray Borg in split decision. Look, this is going to be, I know I sound like a broken record telling you how to bet against Bermudez and lose money. I completely understand it. It hasn't been profitable. The guy, coming from me too, for a guy who just defies expectations, to liken this to baseball, the Brandon Woodruffs of the world, Dakota Hudson, I'm the biggest proponent of just saying, screw it. I'm not waiting for positive regression. I'm just going to get on board. For whatever reason, I haven't been able to get there with a guy like Bermudez, and the situation, I think this is probably the last time. I think that when he does face guys with better submission defense, it's going to be a great fade opportunity, specifically if he's able to keep this run going. This is his toughest opponent by far in Kenny. That is for sure. His wrestling is skilled enough to really kind of, look, he's scrambled every second for second with Ray Borg. The cardio issue has been an issue. It was an issue for him on Contender Series. I do worry about that. But the last time Bermudez went inside the distance, really had to be saved, against Sal Omega. So look, the takedowns, the scrambling, all that type of defense that Kenny is going to employ here. This is the toughest matchup. I don't see him being able to lock in that Bermudez triangle. That's for sure. But I have been wrong on the past. So, take that with a grain of salt. That's for sure. But I'm going to probably be on Casey Kenny at the plus money, looking to continuously lose money fading Manny Bermudez.
Well, you know what? It happens, and you're going to get one of them here eventually going against Manny Bermudez. So hopefully it's this one this weekend. Anything else on this UFC 241 card, prelims, or anything we missed on the main card that you want to touch on?
Yeah, we can look at this as Sunsao and Sandhagen fight just because I think that's two names that people, kind of should recognize. That's for sure. And this is kind of going to be the value play, I think, by the general public, maybe even professionals, is going to be there. And I don't necessarily kind of agree with it. I think it's kind of the obvious narrative to take the plus money, number one, on a fight that is definitely going to probably go to decision in my estimation. I think that you can kind of navigate that with an over 2.5 round prop when that comes in. Makes the most sense from a betting perspective. Is definitely how I would attack that here. But when we look at this, I mean, a Sunsao plus 150, Sandhagen minus 175. Look, I completely get it. This one, it really is kind of a coin flip fight. So I get the inherent value that is there with a Sunsao, and you add in the coin flips of judges, you add in the coin flips of whatever style that they are kind of liking for the evening. Sunsao does present a really big test for the offense of Sandhagen when you look at this, the pressure, the walking forward. The wrestling advantage certainly does go to a Sunsao too, but Sandhagen stays busy enough and counters enough that this is probably going to be a gross split decision either way, and people aren't really going to be sure who outvolumed who or who really won the fight. So the fight goes to decision. The over 2.5 props, definitely the one that I would look to go with when it comes to that fight, rather than just trying to take the quote-unquote value, despite what you actually think is going to happen when it comes to Rafael Assunção at plus 150. Now, look, Assunção, like I said, definitely this is a winnable fight for him, but I would make it a little bit of a stronger case for Sandhagen, and he's just been through this so many times with guys similar. So definitely looking forward to decision prop. Fight goes to distance, over 2.5, all that type of stuff when it comes to there. On the rest of the card, man, a lot of guys I just really can't trust. Jody Escobar, I've made the case for in the past. Market's definitely corrected now. You're looking plus 230. I can't trust the girl. Drakkar Klose. This is a guy in Chagos who has great wrestling, and Klose hasn't demonstrated an ability to kind of get out of that. Brandon Davis is much like a Kyle Bochniak, a guy I absolutely love because he's a decision machine, and over 2.5s have been great there. He's tough as nails. Durability is the other thing I always look for. So I do think that this one does end up going to the judges' scorecards, another over that I would look for there. I just don't think Brandon Davis is, God bless him, he's durable, he's tough as nails. You can't put the kid away. He's just not technically that good inside of a UFC octagon, and King should be able to outvalue him if he's not able to put him away, which, again, not a lot of people have been able to put away Killer B, Brandon Davis. So that's kind of the round robin kind of look around the card, but it should be one of the most exciting fireworks laden shows that we have seen in a long time for a UFC event.
Definitely should be a whole lot of fun. I misspoke at the top of the show here. We won't have a UFC segment next week because UFC is actually off next weekend for the first time in forever, it feels like. Yeah. We do have a fight night card here on August 31st, that one coming from China. So we'll have plenty to talk about with that one here in a couple weeks' time with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast at Christian Pina, Pina, on Twitter. And you can check out his UFC 241 preview over at bangthebook.com. Christian, always a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again here in a couple weeks.
Sounds good, man. Enjoy the fights this weekend and good luck.
There you go. There's Christian Pina, once again, of the Sports Gambling Podcast at Christian Pina, Pina, on Twitter. Coming up on Monday, the Daily Show's return for Bang the Book Radio. We'll start with the Bettor's Box for the first half hour. Then we'll chat some college football with Kyle Hunter to wrap up the show. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again on Monday.